You're listening to the Heart and Soul podcast with Katherine Banco. I'm on a mission to celebrate breakthrough, empowerment, and shameless living in the lives of women everywhere. Join me and let's live unashamed together.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Heart and Soul. Today, I am joined by Jillian Greaves, who is a functional medicine dietitian. She's also a women's health specialist. She is also the co-host of her very own podcast, and she's the founder of one of the highest rated dietitian and functional nutrition businesses in Boston, which is pretty amazing. So, Jillian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you. First, why don't you just let my listeners know a little bit more beyond what I just said about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm functional medicine dietitian and a women's health specialist. What the heck does that mean? In a nutshell, me and my team work with women to really help them identify and address the root causes of their gut and hormone symptoms naturally, utilizing advanced testing, supportive nutrition strategies, lifestyle support, targeted supplementation, mind-body techniques. So ultimately, we are really asking the question why, and doing that deeper digging. Woo, it's early.
Yeah, stuff.
We're doing that deeper digging to really help women get answers, to understand the dynamics driving symptoms in their body, and to help rebalance those dynamics and ultimately achieve symptom resolution. I think something that makes what we do a little bit unique is that it's also incredibly important to us that we support women with developing a positive, healthy, flexible relationship with food and their body. And that's a really important piece of whole body healing in our mind. So that's really kind of what I do in a nutshell, and really working to get women back in the driver's seat of their health. Personally, I went through a lot of my own health struggles long ago, about a decade ago, that really kind of led me to this specialty and ultimately to really want to provide women with the support that I wished I had when I was struggling, and to kind of seek out this type of training. So
I love that. I love what you just said at the end too. I wanted to help women with what I was once struggling with. I think that should be like the pain point of any entrepreneur, is like, how can I help where I once was lacking? So I love that you said that. Would you mind opening up and sharing more about what was going on with your health a decade ago?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of women will likely be able to relate to my story just based on my experience. And, ultimately about a decade ago, I was in a season of life where things were very, very busy, very full, and I was kind of burning the candle at both ends. So I was in grad school. I was working full-time in a really busy clinical nutrition research clinic. I was gearing up to start my training to become a registered dietitian. And I was also running half marathons, HIIT training 4 or 5 days a week. I was eating predominantly a plant-based diet. And I had also been on hormonal birth control for about 10 or 11 years at that time. And there was really, as I'm describing, kind of a combination of things that I think led to my health going haywire, despite at the time thinking like I was doing all the, quote unquote, healthy things, right? But I started to experience a lot of symptoms. So I was dealing with really gnarly eczema. My hair was thinning. I was breaking out. I was bloated. I wasn't sleeping well. And it felt like everything was off. And I sought out support from, my conventional healthcare provider, and was given no answers, and was essentially told, your labs look great. You eat healthy, you exercise, you're the picture of health. Meanwhile, I'm like crawling out of my skin with these symptoms that I'm experiencing. And the only kind of tools that I was offered at that time were, go see the dermatologist and go on a topical steroid. Go see the GI doc and, take this medication for symptom management. So medications for symptom suppression were the only tools that I was offered. And I always like to kind of preface my story by mentioning that I'm never anti-medication, and, medications can be a really helpful supportive tool. And we always respect women's autonomy to make those decisions that feel really good for them. But for me, at the time, I was not willing to accept that these things were happening for no reason and that I just needed to be on medication to suppress those symptoms. So that really, led me to start to look for answers elsewhere, to start to also look into the hormonal birth control that I had been on, again, for, 10 plus years, that I never had really questioned. And in all honesty, at that time, despite, having an undergraduate degree in nutrition, I was, finishing my graduate degree in nutrition, I was really immersed in the health world. I really had no idea what the birth control was doing or how it was working in my body. So I started to look into that and kind of question, what's happening here? Why am I even on this birth control that I was put on as a teen, for PMS?
Yeah.
So I started to really kind of, get educated about female physiology, to get curious about the birth control aspect of things. And, to my surprise, I had learned that there are, some potential side effects with hormonal birth control, gut disruption, nutrient deficiencies. So I decided to, one, take myself off hormonal birth control, and two, really start to get curious about my diet and lifestyle. And ultimately, I realized that, my movement routine that I thought was so healthy was actually really stressful for my body. The plant-based diet that I was following was not appropriate for me. Again, we believe in bioindividuality, support that. Everyone is different. But for me, it led to a lot of nutrient deficiencies, and was a piece of my own, kind of healing journey in terms of some things I needed to modify. So I started, making supportive nutrition changes, integrating, good quality animal products, making sure I was, really eating enough, kind of those foundations, lightening up on my movement routine, taking a look at stress, nervous system, kind of dynamics. And then again, that birth control element. So all of this to say, my journey to healing was a long one, much longer than I feel that it should have been. There was a lot of experimentation involved. And over time, as I became more educated, got more training in functional medicine, was able to utilize, deeper lab tests, understand what was going on, I was able to heal all of those symptoms that I mentioned naturally. But again, it took a long time, and I felt very isolated and just frustrated and alone. I'm just hacking this together on my own. But once I was able to get to a place where I had a clear understanding of what my body needed, started to, see great progress and work towards that resolution with my symptoms, in having conversations with, friends and family, I started to realize, man, there's a lot of women out there also struggling, with symptoms, and, also being told to go on hormonal birth control for every symptom that pops up that they experience versus actually doing the deeper digging to understand the why. So, long-winded story short, I struggled a lot. I came out on the other side of it, and ultimately I'm so grateful for that experience, to, and really how it led me to, kind of do the work that I do today. And again, to be able to provide the support to women that I just kind of so deeply wish that I had had.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you took it into your own hands, because unfortunately, as much as I love modern medicine, because we're so blessed to have it, you're often just a number in an office. So you go in, you share your symptoms, and they're just trying to get to their next appointment sometimes. And so it's very much here's a prescription for this, here's that, you're fine, lab work is good, bye. And unfortunately, we have to do a lot of our own doctoring after that if we're really, really passionate about finding long-lasting, sustaining healing. And one thing that you mentioned and at the end of your little story was that it took a while. And I think also we live in a society or a culture that's very microwave. We want fast results. We want to be able to have answers, fix it, and, bada bing, bada boom, we're better. But I think the patience part is is probably it's probably like the main ingredient for anything worth having in life.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And
Totally. Yeah.
and the fact that you really did some research, you dug into your own health, and then you had to wait to see results. It just goes to show like your passion for the subject. And I remember when I was so in 2020, I had 2 miscarriages, and then I had my son, I hadn't had my son yet. I had 2 miscarriages, and then my doctors kept telling me, well, we can't really like do anything until after you've had 3. And I was just like, that just feels so like, brutal. Like, why would you want to go through a third to figure out how to fix this problem that is so devastating? And so I went to a functional medicine doctor, and she put me on like natural supplements and helped me with my diet. And I don't know if that's why, but I got pregnant with a healthy baby. After that, I had my son. And then unfortunately, I had 2 more miscarriages after him, but I did know to like what noise to block out from modern medicine and what part I needed to focus on with my own like functional health. So anyways, that's just like a little personal story about it.
And I so appreciate you sharing that. And it is such a balance, because there's, so much that we are grateful for with modern medicine. And the fact that there is, assisted fertility treatments in the right cases, or, emergency medicine. But I think, where modern medicine kind of falls short is, the tools in their toolkit for, supporting women with preconception and, getting pregnant or recurrent miscarriages. The tools are these medical interventions, right? And for the right person in the right case, we're so grateful they exist. But it's so disempowering, right? To be in that position where you're like, I just have to wait until I have another miscarriage to do anything. This is just totally out of my control. When that's not true. There's so much that we can do to support the body, to support preconception, optimize fertility, reduce the risk of miscarriage, and to support a healthy pregnancy. And these are things that should be, in my mind, the first line of intervention for women. And if we need to take that step towards fertility treatment, so grateful that's an option.
Right.
But if we can prevent women from having to, get to that point, why wouldn't we do everything in our power to make that happen? We also know, too, that nutrition and lifestyle and for example, the impact that we can have on things like egg quality and sperm quality, these also impact, IUI outcomes, IVF outcomes. So there's so much that we can do. And in practice, we work with a lot of clients who have been given, unexplained infertility, diagnoses, or they've been struggling with, recurrent miscarriage, and no one has talked to them about, even just some of the basics that are so impactful with, again, are we, eating enough? Are we regulating blood sugar? Are we getting the nutrients we need to support, egg quality and sperm quality? Looking at the lifestyle pieces, circadian rhythms, sleep, nervous system support, all of which have a massive impact at the end of the day.
I think sometimes we just kind of like brush it off as like, oh, those things like don't really matter. Like people get pregnant all the time, or, whatever. But it is like our body is a machine. And if we're not properly giving it oil changes and taking care of it, like it's going to have a hard time keeping up with our expectations for it.
Yeah.
I would love to talk more about fertility, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
And how maybe social media might be like leading us astray in the facts about fertility and dieting and like nutrition in general. If you wouldn't mind just kind of touching on that real quick.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you bring this up. Being on a fertility journey is stressful in itself, right?
Yeah.
And then when you throw social media and the online health world into the mix, it's like, oh my gosh, so crazy and overwhelming. It's like the wild west out there. And, certainly there is, some good information and good tools out there. But what we see in practice with women often is, some of these recommendations and some of the things that are put out there actually doing more harm than good, or leading women farther away from, the fertility supportive, diet and lifestyle that we're working towards. For example, I see a hefty emphasis on elimination and on the removal of certain foods in terms of, being pro-fertility or supporting fertility. Eliminate gluten, eliminate dairy, eliminate soy, eliminate this, that, and the other thing. And, in my experience, this ends up being just a complete dumpster fire, and it creates more stress. It really misses the mark for actually supporting the things that are going to move, the needle with our fertility, and can also lead to nutrient deficiencies and, under eating. And so we see that often where women have cut out a laundry list of foods. But again, at the end of the day, we're missing the mark because, in practice with clients, we very much take an addition nutrition approach. So how can we add? How can we provide more nourishment, more support to the body to optimize how it functions? Again, supporting things like egg quality, supporting thyroid function. These things are very energy and nutrient intensive. So let's focus our energy on bringing in those deeply nourishing foods, on regulating the blood sugar, versus wasting our energy on eliminating the laundry list of foods. That being said, are there certain individuals that, could have a sensitivity to certain foods, or there are certain foods that aren't agreeing with them, or they're creating, an upregulated immune response, which, might not be great for fertility? Yes, of course. But the large majority of the time, we see women just unnecessarily restricting foods, and that really taking their attention when we need to be putting our attention on actual nourishment.
Yeah.
So that I would say is a big one. The other thing that I think is really confusing is all of these like supplements that people talk about and are marketed out there. And, absolutely, we use and recommend, supplements with clients in practice for optimizing preconception, supporting nutrient status. But the supplement industry is not regulated. And there's such a spectrum when it comes to like quality and processing and like the bioavailable forms of nutrients. And so it's really important to, in my mind, to not just take a supplement that, your favorite influencer said helped them to get pregnant, and making sure that there's some customization there. And, we're doing our due diligence with, okay, is this product independently third-party tested? What's the form? What's the dose? What are we actually supporting with this supplement versus just kind of blindly, arbitrarily supplementing?
Yeah, it is really easy for me to be scrolling and see someone have something that I want, whether it be like physically or even just a baby, and be like, well, I'm going to do whatever they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not really remembering or realizing or thinking like we all have completely different bodies.
Yes.
And what works for them might not work for me, and vice versa. So,
right. Totally. And it's, just because someone has had an experience, or they, got pregnant naturally after an unexplained infertility diagnosis, that experience alone doesn't make someone qualified to, to be able to provide, recommendations to others who are struggling with that. And, I shared my story earlier, but from that led me, I've had, 8+ or 9 years of, formal nutrition education, and then advanced training in functional medicine and women's health. And, we can't support clients based on our personal experiences.
Yeah.
So that's really important.
Yeah. So, speaking of just hormones and fertility, could you circle back to the birth control of it all? And just kind of, if you really think about it, it's pretty insane that like at 14 years old, we're just getting prescribed like things to stop our natural hormones and replace it with other hormones. But often, we're 14 years old. We don't think about it. We trust that the doctor knows what they're talking about. I was only on birth control for like a year and a half of my entire life. And it messed with me. And that's why I immediately or not immediately, but within a year and a half was like, I'm done with this. Now it works for some people and that's great. But can you just talk a little bit more about how birth control affects our bodies?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So, hormonal birth control, and there's different types, but talking about kind of one of the main most commonly used birth controls, which is going to be the oral contraceptive, a combined oral contraceptive that has our synthetic estrogen and progesterone in it. Essentially what the birth control pill is doing is it is shutting off our own hormones. So it's disrupting communication between the brain, the ovaries. It is shutting down the reproductive system. So we're not producing our own hormones and we are not ovulating. I point this out because it's so common for us to work with women who've been on birth control for, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that we're not aware that they weren't actually like ovulating or cycling on the hormonal birth control, where they thought that, okay, that sort of withdrawal bleed that I get every month on the placebo pill, that's kind of, that's my period. And when in reality, it is a withdrawal bleed. We're not ovulating, we're not cycling, we're not producing our own hormones. There are other types of birth control, like, our IUDs, for example, that don't totally shut down the reproductive system, and we can still, ovulate with an IUD, but ultimately we're interfering with our body's own hormone production. With the birth control pill, there are definitely a number of things to consider. I mentioned nutrient deficiencies, so B vitamins, magnesium, vitamin E, selenium. A lot of key nutrients get depleted by hormonal birth control, and over time, this can really accumulate and lead to greater, dysfunction in the body. We know that hormonal birth control also has a hefty impact on the liver and the gallbladder, and it does lead to gut microbial changes. So it has some negative implications on the gut microbiome. The birth control pill is also associated with a significantly increased risk for mood disorders like anxiety, depression, and that's, again, that's not to say that there isn't a time and place for birth control, or, someone might decide like, hey, I weighed the pros and cons and birth control makes sense for me. But I think my big issue is the lack of informed consent, where women aren't given all the information that they need to make those really empowered and informed decisions. And we work with a lot of women who, have been put on birth control, not for pregnancy prevention and just for managing symptoms. You have PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. Oh, you have endometriosis. You have heavy periods. You have painful periods. You have acne. You have mood swings cyclically. It's the catch-all, the be-all, end-all, right? For any kind of women's health symptom or ailment, it's recommended. And the problem we have there is, again, if we're experiencing symptoms and we're just suppressing them with the birth control by shutting our hormones off, what happens when we want to come off, right?
Yeah.
If those dynamics that were driving symptoms in the first place haven't been addressed, what we see in practice is those things typically come back, and often come back with vengeance, right? And what we also see a lot in practice with clients is, women are put on birth control at a really young age for this, that, and the other symptom. And they come off and they're wanting to get pregnant, right? And it doesn't happen. Their period doesn't come back, or they have such gnarly symptoms, they're feeling terrible from this kind of transition off hormonal birth control. And kind of all these new issues are popping up. So we see that often. And that's not to like scare anyone either about coming off of hormonal birth control. There's lots of things you can do to kind of support the body with a more easeful transition. But I think women have been led to believe, shut your period off until you need to get pregnant. But that's not a foolproof plan. And so, if you are someone listening that's on hormonal birth control and you're thinking you want to start a family down the line, amazing. We do typically recommend, ideally giving yourself like a year runway before you want to start actively trying. So if any issues do pop up, you can support those and not also have the pressure of, oh my gosh, I want to get pregnant yesterday and now I have no period. So giving yourself a nice runway to support the body, and to really, kind of replete nutrients, support gut health, get the body into a great place for, when you want to actively start trying.
and to like re-regulate, give your body enough time to re-regulate back to its like normal status. And, there is such a rise in infertility in our generation. And is a lot of, there's a lot of like, I feel like it might have something to do with all the birth control and hormonal, and our foods and processed and everything like that. But it's really not said on the news or on social media, like this is why there's a rise in infertility. But if you really take a step back and think about it, and I'm just as guilty, like anything toxic, I was using it, like, if you take a step back though and think about it, like to re-regulate your body by giving yourself that year is giving you less stress in the end, because trying to get pregnant, trust me, is very stressful. Mm-hmm. And to get your body at a regulated state where it's not already in fight or flight mode, just relieves a little bit of those symptoms that come with waiting for your little miracle to happen.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And I strongly feel that birth control and kind of the overuse of birth control for kind of, again, every women's health symptom is absolutely a factor with what we're seeing in terms of more challenges with fertility. And I think ultimately, to your point, there's just a lot kind of working against us in terms of like environmental exposures and, our food system and just like life stress. And, there's a lot working against us. And, it's not about being perfect. But I think we do have to be more intentional and proactive about, kind of making some supportive changes, just in relation to our overall health, but definitely when it comes to fertility.
Yeah, this is so random, but do you watch the show Love is Blind?
So I watched the first season.
Okay.
Like during the COVID pandemic days. So.
Well, there was a couple, you didn't see this season, but there was a couple who they were talking about, birth control and when they wanted to have a kid, and, they have to get married in 4 weeks. So they really got to plan out like all their things. Yeah. And the girl was like, well, birth control really messed with me, so I don't want to get on birth control. And he's like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, and unfortunate, and like it was kind of left at like a standstill in the show. And I was watching thinking like, y'all, there are so many other ways to not get pregnant.
Yeah.
One, a condom. Two, it's very hard to get pregnant. There's a very small window in which you ovulate. So like I use the calendar method. Like I track in an app and like works for us. We've never just accidentally gotten pregnant, know? So it was just wild to see this on like national television, one of the biggest shows, most popular shows in the world. And like they couldn't come to an agreement, and there wasn't enough knowledge in these like adult humans to be like, maybe there's another way besides like hormonal birth control. It was like, it was blowing my mind. I'm like screaming at the TV, like, do you not know?
Yeah.
So I do think it's really important, obviously, what you do for work, but for people to listen to episodes like this and to tune into podcasts like yours, if maybe they're not quite ready to see a doctor, at least do your research right now and kind of learn outside of what our little like social media Netflix bubble is telling us about birth control.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. It's crazy that women aren't taught, in middle school, just the basics, right?
Well, it's like that Mean Girls. It's like that Mean Girls quote, like, do not have sex, you will get pregnant, you will die.
Yes, exactly. It's so crazy. And yeah, it's harder to get pregnant than people realize. There's, really that a 6-day window per month. And, most women we work with have not heard of the fertility awareness method or, using things like basal body temperature to, kind of identify their fertile window for either trying to conceive or pregnancy prevention. And there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, there are. So be informed, people. And speaking of that, what is the best way for my audience to connect with you, learn more about what you're doing, and all that? And I'll obviously link it in the show notes, but why don't you let them know?
Yeah. So you can find me over on Instagram. My handle is Jillian Greaves RD. I hang out there, share all sorts of women's health tips, nutrition, tips, recipes, and, all the good stuff there. And then you can also check out our website, which is just jilliangreaves.com. We have loads of, free resources, guides, recipes, all sorts of things to support women with, kind of getting started with those nutrition and lifestyle changes.
Awesome. And I will link all that in the show notes for you listeners so that it's an easy click away. But Jillian, thank you so much for talking with me today. I learned a lot.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Yes. And listeners, I will talk to you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Heart and Soul. If this episode encouraged you in any way, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you next week.